How do you prevent yourself from spiraling when you're in the middle of a setback or if you're experiencing really bad days? Chances are, if you're on the anxiety recovery journey and you're experiencing these intense, mysterious physical symptoms, you're getting panic attacks out of nowhere, you're getting intrusive thoughts, you're feeling disconnected, you're feeling depersonalization, derealization, you might feel like you're in this roller coaster of recovery. Some days are good, some days are bad. And when there's bad days, you go back into fix-it mode. You abandon what you're doing and you go into the spiral. Now, sometimes you might be aware that you're doing this, and you might have even learned as you've been watching these videos that the goal is consistency, but you might be asking yourself, how do I get myself to stop spiraling? You might be aware that you're doing it and you're just not sure what to do when you just experience that wave of panic. Well, in this video, I want to explain to you some tips that you can use so that you can avoid spiraling and stay on course. I'll also help you navigate the nuances of when to take something seriously and when to throw it under what we call the anxiety umbrella. If you're new to the channel, I'll break all this down. Let's get it started. So this video is for people that have been on the recovery journey, who are making some progress, who understand the overall concepts and principles of anxiety recovery. Now, if you're new to the channel, I have a bunch of resources really breaking down the mechanics of anxiety, why you're experiencing symptoms, helping you understand the physiology around it, how to respond, how to deal with setbacks, all these things. I've also created a desensitization blueprint. You can check the link down below, really helping you understand the mechanics of what's happening, what the recovery roadmap looks like, and how to begin responding to your symptoms so that you can reverse the cycle. Now, obviously, this is with the assumption that you've gone to your doctors and you've gotten everything ruled out. In fact, you might have gotten so many things ruled out that you feel like you're lost. You're not sure what to do. You feel like you've done everything you could to make sure that you've gotten a clean bill of health. If there is something to address, you're trying to address it, but the doctor's saying, hey, there's nothing to do. You're fine. And so if you feel lost in that moment, well, that desensitization blueprint down below is really going to help you understand what's going on, which is your nervous system is sensitized, and help you develop the tools and strategies so that you can begin reversing the cycle, and as a consequence, your symptoms start lifting. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to avoid spiraling. Let's say you've been doing really well, and all of a sudden your symptoms hit you all at once, and you go back into, I'm back to square one, and you go back into panic mode, you go back into spiral mode. Now, this is often almost always accompanied with what we call a setback, but it doesn't have to just be a setback. If you're just experiencing a really high anxiety day, you will experience this impulse, this automatic gut reaction that you just want to go in a spiral. You want to go into panic mode. And what happens is that people that are on the recovery journey, they almost get frustrated by this. They say, why do I get myself to keep spiraling? I want to focus on the recovery journey, but every time this happens, I feel like I'm not in control. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be talking about setbacks in particular in this video because I've just made so many videos on it. You can check it out on my channel. I'm going to be talking about the reaction to the setbacks, the reaction to the bad days, which is the spiraling out of control, where you go back into panic mode, where you go back into what we call the 5 Fs. Again, that blueprint will break it down for you. Fearing, fighting your symptoms, trying to fix it, you're focused on it, you're getting frustrated by it, this automatic reaction that you need to fix it or you need to address something. And what that does is that just leads you into like this downward spiral. So it's important to understand what's happening and what are some tips that you can utilize to help you on the recovery journey. And the first thing I want to ask, and this is something I ask people in the mentorship all the time as we're guiding people through the recovery journey, which is, what is your metric of progress here? How do you know if you're doing better or not? In the program, we have a lot of ways of identifying this, and as a consequence, the mentors can really be effective in helping members deal with roadblocks. But because you're watching this video, I want to ask you, how do you define if you're getting better? Some of you might say, well, if my symptoms aren't there, I'm doing better, right? But the problem is that recovery is not linear. It is this up and down affair. It's almost like this roller coaster. But if you're responding well, if you are focused on the recovery journey, you'll notice the symptoms become less and less over time. Now, some of you that have been watching this channel for a while might say something a little bit more like, it's based on how you respond. But I want to ask you something. Is your response going to take the same level of effort each time? Here's what I mean. Look, when you're not having symptoms, I don't need to tell you how to respond. You don't need to tell yourself that you just need to allow these feelings to be there. You just need to accept how things are, or motivate yourself to keep going and pushing through. When days are good, you're fine. What is the effort level here? What's the effort level of you accepting your symptoms? Well, it's zero. It's nothing. There are no symptoms. Or if anything, it's very mild. Now, let me ask you, what happens when the symptom is very high? What is the effort level for you to respond correctly? Well, you're going to notice it's a lot harder. Again, if you are not experiencing symptoms, telling yourself to accept things the way they are is easy. But when symptoms are really high, it's really hard to accept. Now, why is this important? Because the answer isn't as simple as it's based on how you respond. Well, your effort of how you're responding is going to change day by day. Some days it's going to be harder to respond. Some days are going to be easier. But that doesn't negate that you don't respond. It's just that it might be harder. At least it will be some days. Now, why is this important? Well, a lot of times people, without knowing this, is that they measure their progress based on how easy it is for them to respond. Let's say they've been going through weeks where they're feeling a lot better. Maybe the symptoms are lifting. Responding, hey, I got the hang of this. I can do this. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, setback hits. Bad days happen, adjustment periods occur, whatever it is. Now it's harder to respond because the symptoms are there, right? The symptoms show up and then you start realizing that there is this strong impulse to resist. This is where I get a lot of the members in the mentorship saying, Shaan, it was just so easy for me to respond, but now I'm having a tough time staying on course. I feel like I'm spiraling. I don't know what to do. Well, it's important to understand that your level of effort is going to change day by day. When the symptoms are higher, it's naturally going to be harder. It's important for you to acknowledge that. Recognize the invisible forces that are at play here, which is it's not just the response. The amount of effort it's going to take you to respond really does change based on how you're feeling. And so what happens is that the symptoms get so high, and again, this is part of the recovery journey, right? It's not linear. Some days are going to be better. Some days are going to be worse. Some days you're going to have periods where it's completely clear and you're good, and then you might have a little bit of a spike, and that might just have this intense shock value. Again, the biggest focus is to understand that the trend goes upward, right? Even though it's up and down like this, overall, when you look at it in aggregate, when you look at it from a long view, almost from like a macro view, you'll see you're overall getting better. But sometimes you might have moments where you have these high spikes. These spikes where your intense panic attacks come back. Maybe your intrusive thoughts pop up. You might be experiencing derealization, depersonalization. Maybe you haven't felt that in a while. Maybe you might be getting these bizarre, mysterious physical symptoms. Maybe the symptoms have morphed. But what happens is that there's such a shock value that at that intensity, you're having a hard time responding. When that happens, when there's an intense shock value where you weren't anticipating it, you spiral. Now, what are some tips that you can apply to help you on your recovery journey? The first one I mentioned, which is understand that it is going to be harder to respond. And so if you do have those spikes and you feel like you have a really hard time responding, well, then that means that you need more practice responding. Now, here's the good news. You're in the middle of a setback. You're in the moment of experiencing high anxiety. This is the best opportunity to practice your response. A lot of people think recovery is this goal where they don't experience symptoms anymore. They're almost measuring their progress based on their symptoms. Even though they say they aren't, they kind of are. But recovery is more of developing a skill set mastery. It's about developing skills that become almost like muscle memory. It becomes part of you. It becomes automatic. Now, in order for it to become automatic, you need to have days where the intensity is a little bit high, the intensity is a little bit low, and you need to be able to adjust in each one of those moments. So when the symptoms are really high and you feel like you're spiraling, well, you need more time to respond. There might be some elements of your recovery journey that you might have some gaps. It could be that you're not really sure of the mechanics of anxiety. Maybe you're not fully aware of the roadmap of how recovery looks like. Again, a lot of people sometimes think recovery is a linear road. Some people think it's like an automatic light switch where, all of a sudden you're recovered. It's very important to understand the roadmap of recovery. And if you feel like you have a good idea of that, then it might also just be you don't have enough time to respond. Again, this is a general video. It's hard for me to tell you exactly what you need because it's gonna differ. Some people, it's gonna be understanding the mechanics. Some people, it's gonna be understanding the roadmap. For a lot of you, it's gonna be learning how to respond. There's no clear answer here. And this is why the mentorship is so important, right? Because we're able to guide people specifically and give them the feedback that they need at that moment. Now, that's the first part of it. Now, the second tip is also understanding another force that's at play. And that is understanding the role of habit. A lot of anxiety sufferers don't recognize this, but when you're dealing with this for weeks, for months, for years, and you've had this habit of constantly panicking, and now you're watching videos or you're reading stuff about, okay, well, allow the symptoms to be there, change your response. People think it's like an automatic switch where, okay, I'm not going to panic anymore. Instead, I'm going to just respond in a calm, healthy manner. But it doesn't work that way. There's a little bit of an adjustment, right? It's like a habit. You've developed a habit for so long, this habit of panicking, that all of a sudden saying, okay, I'm no longer going to do that and I'm just going to respond this way. Habits take time to develop. Habits become ingrained the more you do them. And so the longer you've been doing this, you'll have more habits of resistance. And one of the best ways to become aware of that is when you're experiencing intense anxiety. So what are some things you can do? Well, recognize the forces of habit that are at play and give yourself some grace. Now, a lot of anxiety sufferers think that if they have a habit, well, if they just correct it and have a new habit, it'll be pretty easy. And it's important to understand that habits don't work that way. What makes a habit is that it becomes unconscious. Basically, your body gets better at doing it than your own conscious mind. So understand that when you're changing a habit, when you're changing this habit of avoiding spiraling and instead responding, it's almost like you're chipping away at something or you're chiseling at something. It's not like you just bulldoze a habit and you just eliminate it. Breaking a habit takes patience and it takes self-awareness. And it's not beating yourself up every time a habit pops up. It's giving yourself grace and understanding the forces that are at play, which is the mechanics of habits, and recognizing that habits aren't something that eliminate quickly. You've spent a lot of time panicking and not knowing what's happening. And by no means this is me telling you it's your fault, but there are consequences to that. And a lot of that is you've developed a habit. Now you have to unlearn this habit. Again, so much of recovery is setting proper expectations on your journey. So many people sabotage the recovery journey and it has nothing to do with their anxiety. Oftentimes, it's because they don't know the recovery roadmap, they're not aware of the forces that are at play, or they have habits that they aren't aware of, and they don't know what it's like to reverse the habits. All these variables are part of the recovery journey, and when people have blind spots, they end up sabotaging their own recovery, and it has nothing to do with their anxiety symptoms. So the biggest focus for you is understanding the following. Understanding that it is going to be harder when the symptoms are high. That is just a fact. It's recognizing that while you're on this recovery journey, when the symptoms are higher, it's naturally going to be harder to respond. And then the second thing is being aware of the habits. Now, I know these aren't quick fixes here. Both these things take time and they take patience, but if you are aware of these forces, well, that will keep you consistent. Now, if you really want to know, how do I expedite the recovery journey? The best way I've always found is having a guide. Having them guide you through the process, having them aware of any blind spots you might have. And that's really the fastest way you can do it. So if you want to know more, you can go ahead and click the link down below and apply for mentorship. We've been getting so many people applying. Just last month alone, we had over 1,000 people apply to the mentorship. I can't believe that this channel has grown that much. So we do have a high demand. So if you're serious about the recovery journey, go ahead and hit the link down below and apply for mentorship. We'll have a conversation, see what your biggest struggles are, see if it's the right fit. Besides that, we have a bunch of resources down below too. I got success stories. I have, other social media. I have that desensitization blueprint, which is a great place to start. This way, if you decide to join the mentorship in the future, you will almost have a head start. You'll understand the principles. It'll be a lot about applying those principles, but you'll at least have a head start. And whoever you decide to work with, just make sure it's somebody that you trust and you feel like they understand what you're going through and that you're willing to be compliant in what they tell you to do. Again, I wish you the best in your recovery journey. I'll see you in the next video.